Hello, everyone. This is episode 58 of the Inventive Marketing Club. We're here every Friday morning so we can build a better marketing strategy together. This week's topic, we're talking about using case studies in your business and how they're an effective way to capture attention of the buyers in your industry, and especially building brand awareness and letting your customers sell your products for you. I also think case studies are a really good way to engage with customers, and that just means talk to them and just find out why they like working with you and talking a little bit about their business. I find that deepens the relationship and ultimately you get more work out of it. Okay, so who's going to be telling us about this? Jack, one of our favorite guests who's covered a few different topics. Jack's joining us today. Do you want to say hello, Jack?
Hi, Ben. How are you?
Very good, thanks, Jack. Yeah, very good. Although it's getting a little hot in the attic, so I might have to go and open the windows in a minute. No, I'm very good, thanks, Jack. And I'm looking forward to your presentation, actually, and sort of taking us through this. So we'll come to you in a minute. Claire, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Ben.
Claire, who runs things in the background, she looks after the engine of the marketing club and makes sure that we have guests like Jack joining us on a regular basis. If it were left up to me, it wouldn't happen, or we'd have these club sessions every 3 months. So thanks, Claire. Hopefully you're well too. Jack, do you want to take it over? Do you want to share your screen, start your presentation? I'm not sure exactly how long it's going to be, but we want to give you the maximum amount of time. That's brilliant. And then maybe just before you start, just give us a little bit of an introduction about what you do, just in case people don't know, they haven't seen you before.
So as Ben said, I'm Jack. I'm from McCaughtrie, and we predominantly help businesses and organizations with their digital marketing, social media strategy and content creation. So we do everything from the planning of how you use your social media channels and how you gather content. We'll help you to understand how that's distributed, so looking at target audience and target markets. And we do that through a combination of sort of mentoring and coaching, but also in the account management. So we will help businesses actually create their content and manage their social profiles for them. And from a content point, that spills into things like case studies, which we'll touch on, but website content, things for blogs, articles, newsletters, emails, etc. So it covers all of the, let's say, the digital arena from a content point, but then also how you distribute it through social channels.
Yeah, and it's I work with Jack on a number of clients, but one of them we work with regularly is Whitley Jones, and it's really nice working with Jack because he just handles all of the content side of things. So we have a conversation with them every month, and we can talk through various different ideas. We talk through all sorts of things marketing, and even though Jack's very you're able to hop onto lots of other things. So it's really good having you as another sounding board to bounce ideas around. But then you do a lot of things for them, don't you? You write all the case studies, you manage a lot of the content for the website, and but also manage their LinkedIn profiles and are able to communicate as if you're them. Not everything, but in terms of getting introductions, looking at their profiles and seeing who is interested, what sort of feedback you get. I think it works really well, and I think it's good to have you on board in terms of doing that. So thank you. Anyway, over to you in terms of case studies.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about the importance of case studies. What are they? How you create them? Most importantly, why they're valuable and how you can use them. So we always start with a very basic question of what is a case study? And the key thing for me when I was thinking about this is I was typing everything out and babbling on. I thought, let's go back a couple of steps. So I think it's really important to highlight the difference between a testimonial and a case study. Because when we speak to people, we either ask them for testimonials or we ask them or suggest a case study, and then people get confused and they get mixed up. So the case study that we talk about, what we create, especially as Ben said with the likes of Whitley Jones, is a piece of information that is a client's account of you working with them. So that's the provision of a service or you providing a product and helping, basically just highlighting how it helps them. So what are the benefits? So why do they come to you? What does that buying process look like? And essentially the crux of the matter is what they actually think of you. So you can use that information across your marketing and your business development activities. A case study there is really to tell that story. So how they found you, why they came to you, what does the process look like? So how did it start and what are the key stages, and highlighting how you did it. So how did you provide that service, or how did you produce or manufacture that product? and all the way through to that end result in terms of what do they get from it, what's that benefit, and what problem has it solved. And it then allows you to take that information and create it in, or put it together into a variety of different formats that then can be used across your marketing to business development activities. So why are they important? Is basically getting someone that you know, a customer or a client, to endorse your brand, your product, and your people, and allows you to encourage or get them to sell that product or service for you. Everybody is familiar with the likes of, let's say, TripAdvisor or Google Review, and we always go and reach out for that information to find out things like a hotel or a restaurant, a Google review about, okay, somewhere to go and visit. That's probably leaning more towards the testimonial element, but it does the same thing. You're going there for that third-party endorsement, because it's all well and good a brand or an organization telling you how fantastic they are, but how can you go and learn from somebody that is in a similar place and position as you, so have the same need or desire? So a case study is a very sort of, as I would describe, a highly valuable asset, and they are possibly the hardest form of content or piece of information to get or to gather, because you're not solely in control of putting this together. Obviously, you're reliant upon a customer giving up some of their time to speak to you on a call or over the phone or write an email and answer some questions. But the value of it and the benefit far outweighs the not doing it, let's say. It's not like an article or a video that you can create, and it's a case of you allocating that time and putting it together, and you can put it out there, and obviously you can use it within your marketing activities. A case study can be used in exactly the same way, but the power of it is very significant. And I think one of the terms that I was thinking about when putting this together is a term that I think Ben likes using fairly often, is evergreen. So evergreen content, and this is in some ways the definition of evergreen content. A case study will go into how you can use it, where it can sit, where is its home online or within your marketing collateral. But it is evergreen. They won't, unless your product or service changes drastically, that case study will. It'll be the gift that keeps on giving. So that investment of time now and on a regular basis is worth its weight in gold in terms of using it in the near future, but also in years to come, and the possibilities and the opportunities to use and utilize that case study in some ways are possibly endless. One of the key reasons why they're important is it helps an individual prospect make that purchasing decision, because they have, when they get to a case study, they're probably already aware of you, and they've been given it by someone, or you've served it to them via social, via email, or it could be that you're already in conversation with that individual. But how are you going to move them along that purchasing journey? And a case study could help that purchasing decision, because it is a live example from start to finish of how someone came across you, how they provided a product or a service to that customer, and what the end outcome was. And if that prospect is in the same market, is in the same position, a case study makes it very easy to relate to and to sort of crystallize some of their thinking. Go, right, okay, I can trust this process as much as I can trust the company. I know what I'm going to get for my money, but I understand the process. It gives me some confidence. And equally, when it comes down to the nitty gritty of the case study, it is reliant upon the information that comes from the client or the customer. So unlike a testimonial that could be maybe a couple of sentences long that will go onto a Google review or onto your Facebook page, or maybe even you can use that text somewhere on your website, the case study is the opportunity to glean more information from your clients. So you can actually try to, in the right way, steer the types of information you want to pull from that client during an interview or the questions, which means you can get it to the stage where they are essentially selling that product or service for you. And how you can use that feedback throughout the case study. It's not just at the bottom with some quote marks. And it becomes, the key bit, it becomes more of an asset. So as much as it's a marketing asset, it's also a sales and a business development asset. So if you've got business development teams or people, they can use that within their own sort of, let's say, their day-to-day communication with prospects and potential clients. So you could look at how you create this case study, and as much as you're using it on your site and using it on a, let's say, a fairly regular basis through your socials and your digital communication, it could actually be in a physical format if there was a brochure or some sort of printed literature. Could be part of the presentation. There are multiple uses to it, but it can actually be part of your business development process, as opposed to just something nice to use within your marketing. So in terms of the importance, they are highly valuable. They take it requires an investment of time, but the value you get out of it far outweighs that investment of time. In terms of creating a case study, if you've never done one before, it could be quite daunting. And as I say, it can be a little bit time consuming. So before we probably get into the actual creating it, if you've never started, my tip would be just go and think about creating one. Just get your first one over the line and follow some of these steps and these tips. And how you select that person, it could be an individual or a company that you've got the best relationship with. So you can lean on them. It's quite easy for you to pick up the phone and get them to devote some time. And that is regardless in terms of the product or service that you've provided. As time goes on and you get used to it and you refine that process, and it's become quite slick, but also it would get easier after the first one, because you could use the first one as an example to attract other customers to do it. I would then recommend being very targeted. So if you are looking to go into, let's say, a new market, if you've got examples of customers or clients within that market, go and get a case study from them. Equally, if you're looking over your, let's say, your business strategy or business plan over the, let's say, the next 12 months, to really push on a particular product or service, make sure that you've got a case study or case studies around those areas to help you within that overall marketing campaign. So be a little bit more targeted. But these are the sort of the type of steps that I would suggest taking when you're creating a case study. And first and foremost, it's about collating the information. It's then a case afterwards, think about what's the best way of using it. So be really, really clear on what you want to highlight. Obviously, you want people to say how fantastic you are and how helpful that you were and the value for money and all the obvious stuff. But apart from that, and I'm guessing you probably wouldn't ask someone that may say things that you didn't want them to say. So though you obviously are going to lean on somebody that you have a good relationship with. But when I say be clear on what you want to highlight, if there was something that you did that was bespoke within your process for this particular client, or they had a very defined need that was a little bit different to normal, you need to be clear that you want to pull this out of that customer, that client within that interview, so that you can highlight it, because the uniqueness is probably what's going to stand out as much as demonstrating the company or the people that you've worked with. Obviously, you're leveraging off that name or that brand, but it shows that you're adaptable, you're flexible, that you collaborate with people. So all those subliminal messages, but quite important topics, those are the types of things that you want to make very clear within a case study, because you probably will go through and talk about the established process, but what made it different? Because I'm guessing the reason that someone came to you to do this is because you were unique, you were flexible, you could satisfy their need, as well as being good value for money and a quality product. So highlight the individual requirements as opposed to what you just provide, and the fact that it was great, because obviously you always set out to provide a great service or produce that fantastic product. And then the second bullet point is just really simple things to the step-by-step of when you're actually creating it yourself. So give an overview of what the whole project looked like, then go into scenario. So this is leaning on what the customer requirement was. So how did they find you? Why did they come to you? What was their problem? What was their need? And talk about them as a business. So really position them as who they are, so it gets across the types of organization you're working with. Then you can get into the process. So you may, depending on the type of the focus of the case study, whether that's the focus being the client or the actual what you delivered, go through the process. But you may want to go in, depending on what it is, into a greater or lesser detail, and document how that journey started. Again, what were the highlights within that journey? So if there are any challenges, how did you overcome them? and what does that mean for the client, get them to talk about those challenges and how they approached it. Ultimately, talk about the outcome, what was delivered at the end, what benefits did it provide, did it tick all the boxes? And then in terms of when I say comment, it's not to put the comment at the end, but get them to give an overall comment. As much as we want the client's input and contribution through the previous steps, get them to give you an overarching comment. So go back to that testimonial. Once you've got all these pieces of information, you can then look to slice and dice it and piece it together in any way you want. But the key thing is always highlight customer requirements and focus on why did they choose you. Because out of all purchasing decisions, a lot of people, unless it's an impulse purchase, the majority of customers will have done their homework. So they have done some research online, or they've been referred to you. But even when they've gone through that process, they've still got to have made a decision at the outset of why did they come to you and decide that you were the best fit to help them with their requirement. So really get into those reasons why, because this will help you to refine or enhance what you're doing internally. So forget the case study, it'll actually get some quite in-depth information and sort of insight into why they chose you, so you can actually develop that within your own internal function. So within your team or within the process that you go through, if there are certain things that really stood out for them, how can you make these better? But everybody's reason for choosing you will be slightly different, or certainly a customer will describe those reasons in maybe a slightly different way in comparison to another customer that have the similar requirement in a similar market, but focus on the why. And the last point is have a set template of questions. And Ben, it actually might be useful. I could share the template. I haven't included it in these slides this morning, but I could share that template with you.
Yeah, that'd be great. It's one of my questions actually going through. It's like, have you got this list of questions?
Yeah, and when I say it is a template, it is a very simple template that you can, anybody, well, I'd like to think anybody could pick it up. I use a similar template for all the clients that we work with when we're helping them with a case study, or they talk about it and they want to do it themselves. But all it does is provide you with a bit of structure. It's simple, so it helps to cut down on that time I keep talking about. Gives a little bit of structure for you to think about, and you then can go in and amend that template. So some of those questions may not be relevant. 9 times out of 10, they will all be relevant, because the aim is to get out all of the key bits of information. But within that, you might then drop in a couple of questions, additional questions that possibly steer the customer or the person you're going to speak to down a particular route, because going back to highlighting those key elements that you want to draw out, but also then to really hone in on the why. So the template is probably, I think it's about 7 or 8 questions, but in actual fact, you're probably going to be asking them, let's say 10, because you're going to include some specifics, especially based on the knowledge that you know in terms of how you've liaised with that customer. And that there, I use that template it structures everything. So sometimes it's worth putting that in front of the client, go, look, I'd like to speak to you about doing a case study, or spoke to you when I last saw you. Here is what we're going to do. And it could be that individual comes back and says, tell you what, I'll send it on an email, or I will put it, basically they will note it down, which is great because you've got it. But in actual fact, it's probably the fact that you share it with them, because you're going to tee up a conversation, you're going to tee up that interview. And again, I use the word structure. These questions structure that conversation. Could be a video call on Zoom, could be a telephone call, because then as you're speaking to them, other questions will come out of it. But it just allows you to set the expectations of the customer. You know the key, you are definitely going to get the key elements of information based on these questions. If you don't get anything else, you've got everything you need. But as we all know, when people are talking, you'll be able to pick up on certain points or certain ways of describing things that allow you to ask another question and encourage that client to elaborate. But the aim is to make it as simple as possible and to structure it so that you know you're gathering all the information through this process, and you get everything you need, so you don't have to go back to the customer or client for any additional information, apart from a little bit later on when you might want to get some approval, which is one thing I always encourage people to do, is to get sign off. So
I do think it's a good idea. I do think it's a good idea to send them in advance, because some people do like to just to think a little bit about the questions, maybe jot down some bullet points. I know I would. But it also gives you an opportunity to say, is there anything they want to talk about? You know, these are the things I want to address, but maybe they go, actually, you know what? I want to talk about our new product, or I want to talk about this specific thing. And it's always nice to give people that opportunity.
Yeah, and also as well, by sending them in advance, that talk about preparation, it allows that individual to prepare. But certainly when we've worked with clients in manufacturing, there might have been you might have one point of contact, and the person that is responsible for defining the need, and they're going to use that product to, let's say, sell in their portfolio or for their customer. But within manufacturing, obviously there is a number of layers to that process. So it may be worth sharing it with your client because they need to go and speak to some colleagues. So you might be talking to, let's say, the project manager, but in actual fact, there was a buyer that was involved, or there was an engineer at some point. So one, that helps you to highlight everything, which is the whole point of the case study. But also then to pick up on your second point, then, is that I've seen encourages it, because those individuals are coming at it from a different perspective, because they had a different set of requirements. Everybody had the same overall requirement, but the engineer obviously had very different requirements to the buyer. Obviously, those individuals are driven by cost and price and value, whereas this needs to do a job. So that sometimes actually prompts another, well, it's a different angle, and you go, okay, well, I didn't know we were going to highlight that, and I didn't actually see it. It wasn't very obvious to me, but it was obvious to that individual, and that sometimes actually totally throws everything out, but for the good reasons, because you go, okay, let's really highlight this because it wasn't obvious to me.
Do you think that, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, that gives you an opportunity to have multiple people in on the conversation?
Yes, yeah. And I think what that does is, if they are in on that conversation, you're obviously going to use that information, and just the simplicity of when this piece of information actually comes to be used, that subliminally documents the depth of relationship that you have with that client. And obviously, if you're working just with let's say, a smaller client, and there is only the entrepreneur or the sole trader or the overall sort of, let's say, the main director. But if you're working with a larger client, has different processes or different elements, and you're able to lean on and talk to multiple parties, that subliminally says to the person that is, or the individuals that are going to read it or see it, well, as much as that information is great, that's me and all the other stuff, the whole point is looking at that added value, to find added value. And it always is that it's down to the people. So you, who is the individual who's providing that product or service, but the people you're providing it to. And if you can document that you've called upon 3 or 4 people in 3 or 4 different areas, it really hits home in terms of there is a deep relationship here. There is that, it sends the signs of collaboration and partnership, which is, it gets to the nub of what's that process. The process is, I work with everybody rather than just to provide what you've asked me to provide. So if we look at, again, enhancing, sort of creating, so just the format, and these are just really simple things to think about. So it could just be a piece of text, some editorial that sits on a page on a website, which is that when we're working with Ben or speaking to Ben, that's by and large, that is what we will do. And the aim is to have that dedicated page that has all of those answers and what piece of information in. The really important bit is that you've got some imagery to support it, some visual assets, and it could be that it's just a picture of photographs of the product being made as it goes through, let's say, the factory, for example, possibly starting with the design element and all the way through to where is it in situ or how is it being used. From the service element, obviously that's a little bit harder to do, but the photography there, going back to those subliminal messages, it could be photography of the client's site or the client's individuals, or you and your team sat with that client, basically you delivering that service. So that helps to get that personal element across. But in its simplest form, a case study should be a dedicated page that sits on the site. And sometimes you might want to publish them as a blog or a news article, so that shows up within that recent activity. But I think it's always really useful to have a dedicated area within the site so that people know very easily to go into that area and they can see all the case studies that you've done, and they can go into those respective case studies and find that information. And that is, I would approach that as an article form. So going back to that process of overview, process, outcome, and comment, you could follow those, and they could be some steps. And I'll show you an example in a minute as how we do that, and it's very simplest form. And that is that you've got text and comment throughout that, and you're publishing it like you would, let's say, a blog or a news article. Another way of approaching it is to do it as like a Q&A interview, and that is that format. That is the text format. And you may want to, as much as we talk about the template questions, you may want to finesse them a little bit if that's the way that you're going to do it. But it could be that you do it as a very personal one-to-one Q&A, and the emphasis is, in actual fact, is to spotlight that individual, spotlight that customer. But it does take the form of a case study, because you are going to go through the steps and ask the questions similar to what you would do, let's say, a traditional case study. And that really gets if we can bring personality to it and really hone in on the individual, we've found that, in actual fact, like all content really online within marketing, that cuts through a lot of the noise if you're able to leverage off an individual, as opposed to just, this is a project that we did. And I know that video is a big thing for them, and a big thing that we both talk to the clients we work with together, but also our own respective clients.
We pester them a lot on video.
And I think a video case study is, as I describe it, it's a bit like the golden ticket, because it is the best way of capturing all of the stuff we've just spoken about in a very simple format. You don't actually have to, as much as the video is probably a little bit more, it adds some layers to the creation process, because you've got to set it up. Customer or client's got to be agree to and then be happy to be in front of camera. But it allows, in actual fact, let's say you're looking for a minute video or 2-minute video, a 3-minute video, in that short period of time, you yourself possibly don't have to do any of the documenting of the process or talking about what you did and how you made something unique, because the whole point is that you get your client to speak to camera and do all of that for you. You prompt them with some questions. It also will help, especially with possibly walking around a factory or walking around a site, or then actually honing in on different parts of the delivery of the service and the output. But you can really condense it, and it is a very neat way of packaging all of that information that can sit on a site, sit on YouTube. Obviously has a great sort of value from an SEO point, because the links going back to your site, but also how you reference a client's site or client's brand. But also we go back to an asset. It's a really simple, easy, bite-sized piece of information that is multi-purpose, multi-use, but is really, really fast in terms of how it's delivered. So you would use a video case study in all the ways we'll talk about in a minute, in terms of a website, social, email, as I say, in that business development activity. So it could be you use a presentation, or you send someone via a personal email or a LinkedIn message. The distribution is exactly the same, but in actual fact, that outcome is far, far quicker, because you're going to get them to watch a video. There's a better chance of getting them to watch a video that will only take a minute or two of their time than actually them reading something. Not to downplay the importance of editorial, but video is that golden ticket.
It's good to have both, though, isn't it? It's good to have a video and that page. Yeah, and then if you transcribe some of it, so you could maybe have your video case study at the top, and then you have like a transcription, or I guess it ends up like the Q&A interview, and so you get the best of both. People can watch it if they want to, and also they can skim down the text if they can't, or they just want to quickly skim that, and it allows you to have both bits of content. Just additionally, Jack, do you think it's worth recording the conversation anyway, even if your purpose isn't to turn it into a video? Is it, let's say you're interviewing someone over Zoom or Skype or Teams, would it be worth recording that conversation to aid you converting it into something else, if that's how you're holding it? Yes, because it allows you to capture all the information. So whilst you're trying to scribble down a note, you might miss something, or you might, in actual fact, not even miss. You may not get down something as accurate as you would want it to. But by recording it, you've got that file. You've got it stored that you can keep going back to make sure that you get those answers as accurate as possible. You get them verbatim, because the really important thing from a case study is that a customer or client may describe something, whether that's your product or service, or their reason, in a different way to you and how you
offer it and position it. But most importantly, maybe in a different way, or in actual fact, a similar way to how a prospect might describe it. So by using those words and phrases, and also the overall description, in fact, when they talk about value and benefits, is really, really important that one, you use it, and two, you get it correct. So it allows you to keep coming back. It also then allows you to possibly to get some more. So you know that when you've recorded it, in your own mind or in your own notes, there are those key bits, those key answers, and also there is a structure to it because it's question and answer, which is great and very easy to follow. But when you go and listen to it for a second or third or fourth or fifth time, when you're putting it together, it will allow you to pick up probably some of the nuances that you didn't get immediately, and actually, in fact, allows you to pull other things out. But also, if we talk about you're using that file or that recording just for the case study, if then, as we were talking, I think it was possibly before we even came on the call, we touched on it a little bit, was the benefit of getting this information and how you use it elsewhere within the business. Again, those words and phrases, for example, could actually encourage you to go and make some amendments on that particular page on the website, or how you refer to it in other areas of marketing. But it's also great to get that feedback and how you then possibly cascade that to the rest of your team. It's all well and good you telling them they've done a great job and that you think they're fantastic, but this case study is in some ways as important internally as it is externally. But by having that information, that raw information, it is something you can go back to and use elsewhere within the business.
That's a good point, actually, Jack. The fact that the case study, we're talking about it from a marketing perspective, but it is really useful to get the feedback from the client, because then you can share that with people. You know, they might say, you might have a conversation with them and they mention, yeah, the team was great, I love working with you, thank you for, you know, your time. But to have that so you can actually share that video with everyone is really nice. So actually, yes, you're quite right. It's like an internal marketing tool.
Of course it is. And internal to share with your staff. You possibly use it as recruitment's a massive challenge at the moment. And this is a really, really small benefit of this case. The whole point that we're talking about this is that outbound, that external look and how you're positioning yourself in front of prospects, but also from a recruitment point. This allows you to document going, look, yeah, okay, we can tell you we're a great employer, and we can tell you you've got these career prospects and do some really interesting, exciting work. But in actual fact, we do, because this is what someone is. We're documenting who we work with and how we work with them. And when you talk about like an internal feedback, I think that also possibly, this is really stretching it, possibly extends to your own suppliers as well. So you might be drawing in expertise elsewhere that the end client may not necessarily know, because you've got different parts or components or resources or whatever coming in from third party. But if you actually put the case study and the good news to one side, when a customer comes back to you to say that something wasn't exactly what they wanted, or let's say the finish on something wasn't the right colour, or I don't know, there was an issue around quality, they're very quick and rightly so to come back to you and go, look, can I ask you about this question? And if then that problem actually originates with a supplier, naturally you're very quick to go back to them and go, look, you need to help me resolve this. But the same should be in terms of the positive news stories. So when you're getting this case and you're getting this great feedback, is how can you actually distribute that with the people that you're also working with? And you're working with your team, but you're also working with your suppliers. And this is, as I say, this is just a very small, let's say, side benefit of it. But it does highlight that a case study truly is multi-purpose, of who you can, not necessarily how you distribute it and how you use it, but who you can put it in front of and the value that it can give to you and your
well, I'm going to add something else to that you just made me think of. It's like a loop within a loop with a loop, so like a recursive reason to use case studies. But another one you mentioned about suppliers. Do you see any reason why you couldn't have a case study of the people that you work with, your suppliers? It's just looking at it in the other way, and it's a marketing benefit to your suppliers. You know, you can talk about them, you can find out more about the people that you work with, but also why you work with them, the projects they're doing. Maybe they'll say nice things about you, so there's a testimonial there. I know it's coming from a different perspective, but that's actually, I would imagine that's quite good for end clients to see, not only just what other clients are saying, but also all of the different people involved in making their product, in producing their service, in delivering whatever it is that company is delivering, could work.
Yeah, I think because as you say, from you using that in terms of a case study or something with that supplier, and the benefit to the end user is, you want to forget yes, you've got to provide something, yes, it's got to be good value for money, and it's got to do a job, but a lot of people will buy into you or buy you because you are very good at what you're doing. So the technology is the best it can be, and you know what's going on, you've got your finger on the pulse, and you are bringing in expertise and experience when you know that it isn't your bag. And you need to call upon those people, but you don't call upon anybody. It shows how you have partnered with the right individual or company in order to deliver that end result. If I could give you a live example, in actual fact, we haven't done it as a case study when now I'm thinking about it, but we do some work with an injection molding company called Rosti Group. And they have all their own product designers and engineers. They do the manufacturing, the contract manufacturing for people. But one of the big things coming from their customers, and one of the big elements that's informing their purchasing decision, is the sustainability element. And as we all know, plastic isn't necessarily the most sustainable, environmentally friendly, although there's things they do with the materials and things. But what we've done recently is we have actually highlighted in a news story of how they've invested in some new ways of some technology and innovative ways of manufacturing, or bolting on things to their existing manufacturing process, that ultimately the outcome is a environmentally friendly product that the customer's after, but it helps them to improve their environmental footprint and what it looks like. But that there is the interview with the person that was helping with the different way of using some sort of water-based technology of how you can reduce heat consumption, things like this in the process. But that will enable and demonstrate to our external customer or customers going, look, this is how we can help you. But also, we know we can tell you that we're experts in this area. We're probably not in this bit, but we know who to go to, and we work with the right people. So yes, you get a testimonial probably from your supplier that tells you how fantastic you are to work with and you're nice people, that possibly helps for other suppliers. But that benefit of this is demonstrating that we are experts, let's say, within our field, and we know how we need to evolve and enhance what we do. And yes, we can change our offering, which helps you, but that might mean that we need to go and partner with the right people. Could even be around the machinery that you use, for example, that a client, the end client, will recognize certain brand names or certain companies from across the globe. If you are using a specific machine or a specific brand or manufacturer tool, it's also thinking, well, you must know what you're doing as much as what the output is. So I think there are different ways and means of who you create a case study or an interview with, and then, as I say, reinforcing that point of how it's used. First and foremost, 70% of your activity and effort is external. It's all about how you position yourself within your target markets in front of prospects. This is also got me thinking about something else as well. But also,
sorry, Jack, I took you off topic there.
no, it actually fits in, because the other thing as well, if we stop there, it's also possibly useful for your existing clients. One, to demonstrate going, okay, I've got a greater knowledge of who you work with and how you help them. But also I'm thinking about possibly ourselves, Ben, really, as much as also then how our clients could use it, is 9 times out of 10, you probably only provide one or a number of services or produce a certain product for your customers. Very rarely, I imagine, that you provide everything that you can offer to that customer, because they will come into you with that, hopefully, that this is why you're working with them, and it's easy for you to work with them as much as why they choose you, a defined need or a defined request, which will probably obviously has one need or one requirement, but probably has 2 or 3, let's say. But if you've got a case study that you're demonstrating who you work with, but also how you work with them, from an existing customer, that go, oh, hang on a minute, we need to know about that, but I knew you did it, and I knew you can help me in that area, but I can see actually how that's benefited that customer because they're similar to me, or not similar in terms of market. Oh, right, they've got a similar challenge to us. That resonates with me. So can you talk to me about this? So in actual fact, it helps you to deepen and strengthen that relationship possibly with your existing customers as well. So if we go, how do we use them? Although, like all sort of conversations and presentations and things like this, I always probably cover what I'm about to cover in probably 2 or 3 slides time. But once you've done all this, you've put all this effort in, and you've defined and refined the process of gathering it, it always comes down to the question of what am I doing and how am I going to use it? And as we talk about evergreen. So when you publish it and it's sat on the site, you will obviously have an immediate need or immediate use for it. But it's also to be really mindful in the back of your mind, this case study, you don't know where it's going to go. You don't know who's going to see it. But also if it sits on the site and it's positioned correctly, it will be working continually for you for as long as it sits on that website or sits online, and you don't know who's going to come across it. So publish it on its own page or with its own area of the website. But I think it's really important to highlight it within the homepage somewhere. I don't know what your thoughts are, Ben, but everybody, I'll say everybody, a lot of sites will have, obviously your homepage is your that front door to your business, and it's great. It positions you accurately and correctly and gets that message, that key message across quickly. But on a homepage, it's also used as a vehicle to get you to elsewhere within the site. And you might have a news feed on there, so your most recent articles will sit on there. But that's not to say that you can have a case study that sits within that. So that's a live churn or change of information that when people land there, it's a great way in some ways of forget what you want to tell me. I want to know what does somebody else talk to you about, and they get that essentially instantly or within the first few seconds of being on the site. So I think it's really important to highlight somewhere on the homepage. Then there's the simplest form of sharing it through your social channels. Like anything else, treat it the same as any other piece of content. So any news article or any page about, again, that product or service, any photography. And don't just share it once. Have a bit of a plan around each case study, and think about how you might, in your social posts, not use it, like, don't blitz out. This is the same for any content. Don't have multiple posts consecutively throughout a week on your Twitter feed or through LinkedIn, because that essentially will be boring for your audience. But think about that. You might want to get it out there initially. There's a big bold statement about this is a new case study. This is what we talk about. This is how we help someone. But go in the future, go back to that case study, and you might want to use it the following 2 months and just to sort of highlight things, but honing on particular questions or particular pieces of information within the case to lift it and amend it. But it allows you to get more value from a social point. It helps you with that content planning, and it helps you to really reinforce and reiterate, this is what we do, this is how we help someone, and this is who for. Then in terms of email campaigns, it's great, again, initially to possibly include that in your next email newsletter, like you would with any other piece of information. But it could be that then you go and use it for targeted emails. Sometimes we've found with case studies, it is better to have, you wouldn't necessarily have a dedicated campaign that runs every month or every 6 weeks, but you could have a template for your case study that as and when they get published, they are slightly out of sync with your normal newsletters and campaigns because you really want to draw some attention to it. So that could be something that you do to all of your lists. But then to take that step further, if you've got certain lists or email data or email lists for specific products or services, and also specific target audiences and markets, have a dedicated campaign that just drops in front of those people within that have those interests.
So could that be like clients who maybe they're buying one product from you, but you would like them to buy another product set? Maybe you could approach them with a specific campaign. Okay, I know with Whitley Jones as an example, we've set up a little email drip. So basically, when people subscribe to this list for whatever reason, I won't go into the detail, but people subscribe to a mailing list, they receive 3 emails. The first one is kind of a hi, meet the team, and we'll be with you soon. It's kind of just setting expectations. But the second email in that list actually goes through 3 testimonials and then links through to 3 case studies you've written. So we're using case studies within these drip emails just to show what other clients do. So it's not only demonstrating this sort of social proof that Jack was talking about, that other people will work with you, but maybe giving them some other ideas, sort of saying, you know, you might be thinking about working with us for your boarding furniture, but we also do this, this, and this. And so it's helping just before they have that conversation with them, educating the customer on all the different things that Whitley Jones do. I can't remember what the third email is, but I can't remember what the third email is. But anyway, it wraps it up nicely. And that's another way of using it, not just an email campaign, but also just part of the general conversation that all clients see before they actually start working with you.
Yes, and we'll use some. I'll go and show you some examples in a minute, but this is how we would use that one to be. Everything's all about balance, and it's more of taking a piece of information about how can we be targeted, but how can it be used elsewhere. So you may use an email, a case study within an email, again to that specific target audience, but also you might use it elsewhere with other forms of communication to demonstrate the breadth of clients that you work with. So it demonstrates that you actually do deliver all of those services. So that also highlights another point. So over time, you should be building up case studies across all areas of the business so that you provide examples to specific people within that defined need or that particular category or product or need or product or service. But then, so that is a valuable asset speaking to that pool of people, but also it covers a whole breadth of the company or the business and what you provide. So it is, again, that proof going, it's not just a page on our site. It's not just something we add on and it's a little bit of an additional, but we don't do a great deal of it. But again, there will be elements of that. But if you've got over time the opportunity to create a case or a piece of information that backs up and demonstrates everything that you do, that is that proof to everybody or anybody that we do deliver. That then you can roll out when it's really defined and targeted, but also it's just great as a demonstration of like, this is us as a whole. Which again it's similar how we treat any other sort of content strategy. So how you give attention to all areas of the business, the same should be treated with case study and those products and services that you provide. One of the other key ways of using it is to encourage your clients, to the people that you have interviewed and the subject of a case study, to share it through their own channels or however they see fit. This is a great way of leveraging off their audience. And also, they have given up their time and effort to provide you with information, to sign it off and approve it and amend it. That it should be, well, what are you going to get out of it? Oh, here is a piece of information talking about you. This is good for you to demonstrate who you work with and who you're essentially going back to that customer supplier and then the supplier's supplier, that all the people in that process, that actually goes back an element in terms of how we're telling you could use it. And it's great for a customer to share it again within their own channels or their own sort of ways of communication, because it demonstrates to, as I say, their audience, who they work with, how they do it, and it's a good newsworthy piece of information. For you, it is again another layer to that third party endorsement. It's somebody talking about you using their own ways and means of doing so. So it's a great way of attracting greater awareness and putting it in front of, again, a targeted audience. So the reason that you create this case study is to highlight a piece of work with that particular client, probably because you'd like more clients like this, the subject of the case study. So naturally, they're going to be within those circles and in those conversations. A great way of you pushing that information into those pools of people that it's endorsed, and there's that builds that credibility that attracts people to come back. This is possibly the hardest element, again, because you're not in total control. The only thing you can do is ask, as I say, encourage. Sometimes we've found that it might be worth giving the customer or the client a little bit of structure. So it could be you draft those posts or you position it and package everything up. One, because it makes their life easier, but also you're probably not talking to the individual that is responsible for the marketing. So this has got to, that chain of communication got to be passed on and encouraged to the marketing manager or someone like me or Ben who's helping them. So it's, if you can make the person you're speaking to's life easier, then that gives you a better chance of doing something. As a side note, I've also found that one, this is a better way of getting it across the line, but two, it actually encourages some inspiration. So there are a number of examples where we have gone, look, here is a suggested LinkedIn post, or here's a suggested way of sticking it on your own website and or your news article and then linking through. What that actually does is encourage them to go in and review and enhance what you've actually written, as opposed to when it's actually come off, which doesn't happen, when you've just asked someone, can you share this? And they've typed out and written this post, and you look at it and go, it's not exactly how we wanted it positioned, but one, I'm really happy that you have shared it, and two, I'm glad that you've actually used us and you've bought into the idea. But by making their life easier, I've actually found that they've thrown it all out and rewritten it themselves, and you go, well, that isn't how we described it, but that is exactly what we want to say. So by creating that package of posts or giving them some sort of instruction, again, it's an extra layer of time and effort, but it is worth it when it does come off, because that third-party endorsement is a great way of getting links back from another site. So there's all those SEO benefits, but it's another way of utilising it within the communication.
Definitely is, I think, really important once you've got that case study to get it shared far and wide. Absolutely. Jack, we're just coming up to the hour. You said you had some examples to share. I think it'd be good to make sure we get some of those in.
Yeah, let me just show you a couple of these examples. If I just stop the share and I'll reshare my browser. So I just have a couple of examples. So we've mentioned Whitney Jones several times on this call, but I thought it'd be worthwhile sharing it because me and Ben have been involved in piecing these case studies together. So we tried to do this with, so Whitney Jones are a school furniture manufacturer, and they provide a whole breadth of furniture for all areas and settings across a school or an education estate. So we want to highlight who they work with, what they provide. So in this instance, specifically library and classroom furniture. They also do science laboratories, boarding furniture, storage furniture, teaching halls are quite popular. But also we want to leverage off some of the schools that they work with, because we've found within education as a whole, people will go to suppliers that their peers and similar organisations have worked with. There's a massive element around trust and credibility. But also we want to highlight specifically with the guys at Whitney Jones, how they have helped a customer or client with their specific requirements around design, because the guys at Whitney Jones have their own product design and furniture design team in-house, and the whole USP is they provide and manufacture bespoke furniture. So there are always three elements to any case study when we're working with the guys at Whitney Jones. So it's what is the furniture for, who is it for, and how has it been produced, because it will always be totally unique. So the aim is that we will tell a story through finished product, so we can see here how the furniture is being, not just in an empty classroom, which is what the fitting team probably see when they last leave, but we want to see it in use and demonstrate and resonates with teachers, with contract managers, architect builders, etc. Oh, right, this is what it looks like when teachers and students are using it.
I've just got to say, Jack, actually, that it is difficult for them to get those in-use photos because they often doing this during the holidays when no one is there. And so suddenly they've got to take a photo when they can at the end of the project. And then it comes, it's actually difficult to get the kids in. It's also that they might have a block on, they don't know who they can have in the photograph or not. So it's quite tricky.
Yes.
I will add something that works quite nicely with these case studies is that a lot of the schools are knows is the wrong word, but they're interested in what other schools are doing. So that one of the reasons their clients are interested in these case studies, and certainly when they come through on the email, is because they like to see what their schools that are similar to them or adjacent or in the same area are doing, or who's got a new classroom, who's got a new science lab, which what schools are being upgraded. And that works quite well for them, actually.
I think that also acts as it's that inspiration as well. That when that another school that, as I say, they know of the subject of a case study, is that especially there are developments within trends and also possibly a little bit we touch on compliance. How this is what we know is the conversation, but what's it look like in practice? Oh, and then they will look and go, oh right, okay, that is one, you can do it, but also that's how that school has actually put it into action. I think what we also use is this is a great way for us to, so we create videos, so testimonial videos based on the areas of furniture. So we will use, again, another benefit or multi-purpose of the case study is we're able to extract some of the testimony and comment from the customer, from the client, and repurpose it elsewhere within the marketing. So there is a testimonial page. We will add it there. We'll also add that testimonial to the product page, but also then we can go and use that piece of information in a video. So we do like a bit of a highlights reel of recent projects. So from that one investment of time from you, one investment of time from the client, yes, you've got your case study out of it, which is fantastic, and we can use it as we've just described. But then there are other, let's say, another handful of uses and benefits from that case study.
Yeah, it can be broken up, can't it? And do you want to just quickly look at some of the other ones? I see you've got a few other tabs there.
So another one that we use is just a bit of background. So Adelstrock Consulting are a Midlands-based headhunting recruitment firm, predominantly work in accountancy and finance. So we've just spoken about Whitley Jones. This is very brief of how we do want to actually highlight the customer and the client. There are others, and this is where we do a lot of work with clients who work in, let's say, protected or discrete industries, accountancy and recruitment being one. So it's very difficult sometimes to name a customer or client because there's a lot of sensitivity around it. You certainly can't mention a candidate. So this is where it's really, really important to focus on the detail you get from a candidate or client, because you've really got to get across the nitty-gritty detail of how you've helped them and what that process looked like, especially in something as important as a career move or a sort of career planning, because you can't leverage off that name. So here the format we use for Charles and Adelstrock is to go back to that defined format of overview, process, result, and outcome. And we talk about the scenario of what that candidate was doing, what's prompted them to look for a new job. But then the whole point we want to highlight here is that it's not that these are a sort of, let's say, a niche high-end recruitment consultancy. They aren't mass market. So we really want to highlight what is that personal approach, the knowledge that is imparted from the consultants. So as much as the testimonial is really important, we just want to go through that process because it's when you're moving jobs, it's that hand-holding process. You're trusting someone to find the right job, find the right company. Yes, you're paying your package, but we've actually got to go through how did we look after you from start to finish? Because we might not speak to you or see you until you're ready for your next job. Or in actual fact, what we find within the industry, the candidates become the clients later on once they've been promoted internally. So we've got to get across how we've looked after you, but also what that longevity looks like from a career progression perspective. So we always do this from an interview point, and this step by step. It works for the client, but also works for their clients in terms of how it's used. This is primarily used within business development activities because, again, this is more of a discrete industry and way of going about it. The other case that we want to look at is a client, again, based in the West Midlands. They are a facilities management company, and we want to highlight the great spaces that they create for their clients. So again, this is a little bit sort of step by step, and we talk about what the problem was, how the business was procured, but also then how it's delivered. And the big focus here within this industry and also within this client is the people. So we want to differentiate. It's the team and the people that actually belong to the client as much as it belongs to the Fidelis themselves, for example. So the big thing here is really big pictures, because we want to get across their vibrant, clean spaces, but also then possibly the nitty-gritty of what is the solutions provided. And this is a perfect example. They will work on tendered projects. So they could provide 15 different cleaning and facilities management or maintenance services, and they probably will provide 5 or 6 on average to one client. They can provide them all individually. So the aim is to get across how do we look after your whole site. In terms of business development, as much as we use this for your marketing and your recruitment and things like that, the case studies are actually used as part of their tendering package. So they actually are a business development asset, because when you're tendering for local authority or large scale contracts, a lot of it is based on evidence. So these are actually constructed and created in such a way that they can be lifted and used in the contractor or the tendering process, as well as with an element of how can we use it through the social, through on your website.
I
So
love the images here.
Three slightly different ways of using or creating and using a case study.
These images are really good. I mean, were they taken by a professional photographer or
Yes,
someone in-house?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that does make the difference. Not only are these huge, but they're very good quality images. And that does make the difference. Obviously, you can't do that for everything. If what you're delivering is very service orientated and it's maybe even a digital product, it's very difficult to see that. But maybe there are ways to be creative with that. Jack, we've run up to the hour, so what we'll do is we won't be able to take questions on the recording, but maybe if people stick around afterwards, they can fire you some questions. I have a few, so I'm going to ask you those as well. Just as we sign off, Jack, I mean, where can we find you if people want to work with you to produce case studies or any sort of copywriting or social? Where's best to contact you?
There's probably a few places. You could go to the Rather Inventive website because I'm listed on there. Find out what we do. You can find us at caughtrie.co.uk, and you could also find me on LinkedIn. So full name, because I think I've only been referred to myself, and Ben's referred to me as Jack. So it's Jack McCaughtrie, and you can find me on LinkedIn.
Cool. Thank you, Jack. And, there's a couple of other relevant club sessions that we've done, which tie in very neatly to your case studies. One of them is number 14, and that's on video testimonials. And that's where Claire and I kind of take an element of what you're talking about and see how that applies to videos more specifically. And the other one, again, relating to one aspect of it, testimonials. So episode number 5, we talk about 5-star testimonials and how to get them. And I guess you can kind of use the advice from all of those. I mean, I always like to say, well, if you can do something once and repurpose it into many places and make sure it's evergreen, like Jack mentioned earlier, thanks for that, Jack, then, you're not wasting your time. You're not thinking about this as a chore. This is about not only creating, getting feedback, it's about getting testimonials, it's about developing content for social, content for the website, and then forming part of your search engine optimization strategy. Case studies are core to that. So thank you very much. What I'll do now is we'll sign off and then we'll catch everyone after the recording. Just before I do, Claire, what can we find, what we talk about next week?
So next week we're joined by Ronald Giselle, and he's going to chat to us about WooCommerce and the benefits, product development, and the sort of social platforms around that. So
cool. No, I'm excited to talk to Ronald because he's now working for Automatic, who are one of the main key funders and open source contributors behind WordPress, very big organization, and they're really sort of pushing through on WooCommerce and going into a very interesting area of this omni-channel. So if you want to find out more about that, come and see us next week. We're here every Friday from 10 a.m. We cover everything: marketing, case studies, strategy, social, SEO, everything really. If you've got something exciting to share, if you're doing something interesting in your business, or you've got a product or service, or you want to talk about something that relates to marketing, get in touch, support@ratherinventive.com. And if you want to invite a colleague on, no problem at all, just share the Zoom link, bring them on, let us know so we can welcome them. Otherwise, don't forget to catch up with all the previous webinars. There's lots, about 3.5 years worth now. They're available on Basecamp or on our new fangled website. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you all next week.